Hello and welcome back to Paper Fiore. I am Kristen Sluin and I am so glad you're here because I'm here to announce that I have made a website. I am no longer in the blogosphere. I have now a website. And to celebrate that, I am doing a giveaway in conjunction with the Create It 3 Ways Instagram Hop today. The theme for today's hop is Get Well Soon, and Altenews Sulfur Cosmos stamp set is the perfect product to use for it. I've started off with a piece of 5.5 by 6 inch cardstock and I placed it in my stamp wheel. And I'm now going to ink the main image with Altenews Permanent Gray Pigment ink. If you are afraid of double stamping, this is the perfect way to do it. Start off with a light ink, stamp your image, and then that way you are able to make sure that your stencils will align with the image. Then once you are done with all of your stenciling and you want to go back over it with some black ink, if for some reason it's off just by a shade, it isn't going to show up. It's really a great way to do the double stamp technique without running the risk of misstamping. And I don't know about you, but I have misstamped many times. So this is the technique that I use now so that I don't run that risk. Now that I have the initial image stamped, I'm going to go ahead and start stenciling. This is the color group that I'm using for my first card. And now I'll use the stencils, which I absolutely think this is fantastic because it actually comes with a background stencil as well. So for these stencils, they are divided in half. They'll have that little squiggly line that is imprinted into it so that you can do 4 different layers of stenciling for these flowers. It really creates such a beautiful image when you are done. Now I'm starting off with strawberry and I'm just doing a very light coating of it. Then I will go in with the dusty pink, which is the next color in the Blushberry Bliss family group. The third color I'm using is Blush Rose, and I absolutely love that color. I just think it's gorgeous. Now, instead of going with the darkest color from that family group, I opted to go with Cherry Sweet, and I just love that color. It's one of my favorite colors. So it just made it such a bright, happy flower. Now, as you can see, I'm moving on to the second half and I'm going to repeat the process with all of my colors. So the first part of the stencil did like the second layer of petals. This does the first layer of petals. So I didn't go as dark and I did not add in the Cherry Sweet for that deep dark highlight there because I wanted to have some depth. And keeping that layer with a lighter color makes those petals stand out more. Now the third layer of petals, I will go in and make it darker because those are the ones that are in the background, the back part of the petals of this flower. So I will go through and do all 4 of the colors and make it much deeper than I did from the first layer of stenciling that I did. And then once I finish with this third layer, I will start into the 4th layer of petals. And that is the petals that are in the furthest in the back. So I'm only going to be using my 3 darkest colors. I will not use the strawberry. I will start with the dusty pink, then move on to the blush rose and the cherry sweet. And I will use a lot of ink in those instances because I really want those petals to look like they are far in the back of all of the other petals. Now look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? Look at the depth of those petals. I really love this stamp and stencil set. It is absolutely beautiful. Now I'm going to go ahead and move on to the green leaves, and I'm going to add some teal to it. I love doing this type of a technique. A lot of people do it, but it reminds me of the Greenbrier Resort in West Virginia. I love Dorothy Draper as an interior designer. She was very popular in the early 20s and through the late 60s. She just did beautiful work. And this really reminds me of the type of fabric that she would make and use for her designs. She also did the Mackinac Grand Hotel. So if you're familiar with either of those hotels, you will see what type of style that I really love. I actually have my house decorated that way too. Now the leaves do have 2 separate stencils with it, so I'm going ahead and moving in to the second stencil. Now the greens that I used were aloe vera and matcha, and then the teals that I used were Pool, Mystic River, and Teal Tempest. look at how much depth that Teal Tempest puts in there. Oh, it's just extraordinary. I really love it. Finally, I finish off the centers of the flowers with golden honeycomb and melted butterscotch. Now that I'm done with all of the stenciling, I want to go back and put a black line around it, and I want to use the stamp for that. So I did leave the stamp on the platform of my stamp wheel, and now I'm going to move the cardstock back to the corner where I originally stamped it, and I'm going to go back over it with the permanent gray ink. The reason I'm doing that is just to make sure that there hasn't been any adjustments or anything out of line, and so now that the image has been stamped there, it looks great. I will go back over it with the Altenew black ink. The Obsidian black ink from Altenew, it really is a beautiful color. It does great stamping, and you can even emboss with it, which is fantastic. It's a great black pigment ink. Doesn't that look fantastic? Now I'm going to go ahead and stamp my next card, and this time I am going to use different colors, but I'm going to use the same process. I did, however, opt to take the stamp off because I decided I wanted this flower to not have a black outline on it. So these are the colors that I'm using, and I'm just going to run through this one as quick as possible because you've already seen the process once before. Now that my first two stenciled images are completed, I'm going to go ahead and die cut it. They do have coordinating dies to go with this set, and it also has dies to go with the larger sentiments in the stamp set. Now that those two are completed, for my third card, I have decided to go a different route. And this is actually one of my favorite techniques to use up the ink that is still on my blending brushes. I don't know about you, but I always hate that I feel like I'm wasting my ink. I like to use up everything that I have, all of my resources. So I am going to go ahead and stamp the image, and I'm going to heat emboss it with white embossing powder. I'm going to also do the sentiment. Now, once I have that done, I am just using blending brushes that are in my stash that already have ink on them. I am not even going to pull out a single ink pad to do this card. This is all ink that is left over on my blending brushes that I have in my stash, and I'm going through and I'm just using red, yellow, and blue, and I'm overlapping them so it fills in the whole color of the rainbow. Then I'm going to go through and add on my stencils and use the colors that mix. So I'll use a little bit of a green brush. I'll use a red. I use all the colors that I need: red, orange, yellow, blue, green. And I will go ahead and stencil all of the images just using the colors that are underneath it. So it creates this beautiful rainbow card. This really is a fantastic technique. You don't have to use what's left over on your brushes. You can always pull out all the different colors of inks if you want to do that. But this is something that I do usually at least once a week. And I'll pull out whatever stamp set or stencil set that I'm using and do this technique. It just makes me feel like I'm using all of my products to the best of their use and to the best of their ability. And then it also makes me feel like I'm not wasting anything as well. So I'm going to go ahead and finish off this card, and then I also go through and I add a little bit of ink around that sentiment as well, just so that I am having it stand out a little bit. Now, I don't normally do this, but on this particular card, I decided I wanted it to stand out a little bit because you're going to see in the bottom corner of this card, I accidentally set a baby wipe on it. So it leached out some of the colors of the card. So I decided just to go over some of the petals with some alcohol markers. That way I can kind of cover those up, and then you'll see a little trick that I did at the very end to make it not nearly as noticeable. I mean, it's noticeable, but I kind of hide it a little bit. So now I have all three of them done, and I'm going to work on my backgrounds. You'll see in the top left, the card panel. I was originally going to go that route, but I ended up going a different way. But I'm using the Altenew Shimmer Paste. This is the pearl that I'm going to be using over pink cardstock for that red flower. Is that not gorgeous? Oh my gosh, look at the shimmer that this makes. I just can't get over it. Look at that. Isn't that just beautiful? The Altenew pastes are so stunning. The other panel that I had made that I was originally going to go with for the yellow flowers, I've set aside, I'll use it somewhere else, but that color is also absolutely stunning. Now I'm going to go ahead and make my card bases. I am making an A2 card base. So this is a piece of cardstock that is 4¼ by 11. I folded it in half, and now I'm going to just adhere everything together, put my backgrounds down, and I will do this process for each of my cards. Now, I decided instead of going with the other panel that I had made, wanted that yellow just to pop, and yellow really does a great job over purple or blue, so I decided to go with blue, and I went with sapphire. So I am inking my background instead of using the paste for my background stencil, and I am using the sapphire ink on a sapphire piece of cardstock. Now, like I said before, I hate to waste ink, so I went ahead and just took all the ink that was left over on the stencil, and I put it on a piece of cardstock, and I set it aside, and I will add more ink to that as I go when I'm doing any stenciling. So I always have these pieces of cardstock that are just hanging around that have random colors on it, and that is also a way that I do a lot of my backgrounds. Now with the yellow flower, I decided I wanted the layout to be a little different, so I cut it in half, and it worked out perfectly. Look at that. Don't be afraid to cut your images once you have them done. It helps you give some variety. Now here's where I showed you that I dropped the baby wipe on top of that. I was so upset. But here's how I'm going to solve my problem. I'm going to mask off the flowers that I worked really hard on making beautiful. And I am just pulling out my spray bottle and flicking the tube that has water left over in it. And it's going to give that water effect all over the side of that panel. Then I'm going to go back with some white paint, and I'm going to just splatter some white paint on it. And there you have it. It's all done. I even did it over the flowers a little bit too. This one is also going to be on an A2 card front, and it is a top folding card. So I'll set that aside and let that dry. So I'm going to pull out the first card again and decide on what I want to use for the sentiment. Now when I stamped it, I missed a little tip of that. I didn't realize that until I was pulling it out there. So I've just added that in with a black marker. And for my sentiment on this particular card, I decided I didn't want feel good or feel better soon. Now it does have that particular sentiment in there, but I didn't want to do it on all three of my cards. So for this card, I went with big hugs, and the supplemental sentiment was hope you have a speedy recovery. So that is what I opted to do. I'm going to go ahead and stamp that in black. Why I didn't grab my Ultinew, I don't know, but I think that's just what I happen to have sitting on my desk. So I went with the Versaclear black ink, and then I'm just going to heat emboss it with clear embossing powder. Now, when I do my embossing, I use a sheet of deli paper. I don't know if anybody else does that, but it's super cheap. It's biodegradable, and you get them in boxes of like a couple hundred. So they last me forever. Now I'm going to go ahead and pop up my image onto my card base using some foam, and I will adjust my sentiment on there. And I like to use one of those T-squares just to make sure that everything is centered and it's level. So I do it with my sentiment that is a sentiment strip, and then I'll add in my larger sentiment. And now that I've got it all assembled, I'm going to go ahead and cut off the excess that's hanging over, and there it have it. It's beautiful. I'm going to repeat this process with my blue card now in my yellow flowers. And here's another tip. I don't know if you guys do this, but I have one of those little Rachel Ray buckets that I put all of my things on. It just sits on my desk, and I use it just to throw away little scraps instead of having the big garbage can sitting next to me. I just use that, and then I dump it into my big garbage can. I'm sure everybody else does it, but that's something that I choose to do here on my desk. Now that I have the card panel finished, I'm going to go ahead and create my card base. This time I'm doing a side fold for an A2 card, and I'll go ahead and glue it on with some liquid adhesive. I like to use the liquid adhesive just because, sometimes you don't line it up great. And if you have it with, some glue or like a sticky strip or whatever, you can get it messed up. So I like using the liquid adhesive to put my card fronts on. And then I just use either a weight or my magnets to make sure that they adhere well to the card base. Now for the card sentiment for this one, I opted to do a vellum. I felt that putting something over it that was on a cardstock that was just like a white cardstock or something was going to cover up the really pretty background that I created and also cover the flowers a little too much. So I decided to do it with vellum, and I am going to go ahead and heat emboss it, and I'm going to use white embossing powder. Now that it's die cut, I'm going to go ahead and adhere it with some liquid adhesive. And I don't really need to pop it up because the flowers are already popped up, and I'm just going to place it right on top of it. It's just a very simple, beautiful sentiment. Now that I have all of my card fronts completed, you know me, I have to have some shimmer and shine, so I am going to be adding some gems and enamel dots. For the first card, I went with an iridescent rhinestone gem from Altenew. I absolutely love these things. I go through them all the time. But look at that shimmer and shine on it. Oh, it's divine. It's divine. Now for the second one, I went with just plain white enamel dots. I wanted to keep it as simple as possible, just to go along with how the simple flowers are without the outline and the simple background. So I really liked how this one came out. I love how simple it is. I mean, it's not clean and simple, but it's simple. At least for me it is. Now for the last one, I decided to go with the little blobs that look like water droplets. Since I had that water problem along the side, I went with it. I just kind of embraced it. So this one also has all of the water gems on the side. So here they are, all three of my Get Well Soon cards. This first one, it is just divine. I mean, this sings to my little glitter heart here, right? The shimmer of the pearl Altenew paste, I could just eat it up. It's so gorgeous. And then the gems, the iridescent gems with it, chef's kiss. This one I love as well. I do like it without the lines on the flowers. I just think it just adds a different touch to it. And then this one is really one of my go-to techniques. Try it. It's just kind of cathartic, and it really makes you feel like you're not wasting anything. So if you like these cards and you happen to like the stamp and stencil set, I am giving them away. So you have the opportunity to win the Altenew Sulfur Cosmos Stamp and Stencil Set, the Cosmic Garden Alcohol Marker Set that includes 12 markers, as well as Altenew Fine Blade Scissors. In order to win, you just need to do the following things. Follow me on Instagram. Subscribe to Paper Fiore on YouTube, join our mailing list on my new website, paperfiore.com, and tag some crafty friends for even more chances to win. Thank you so much for being here today. I really appreciate everybody's support, and I'm excited about this new journey with the new website and being able to create even more content for you all. Thank you so much. Have a colorful day. Bye.